Thank you, Gia. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. What I'm going to do is put it. Can you make sure my screen is pinned, please, Gia? Good morning, everybody. Oh my goodness, we are on day 5. This is officially the last day of the first series. So what I want to do today, we've got a fabulous guest today coming at 10 o'clock, Ruth Hotson, who is going to talk to us about unlocking our full potential. And I feel like it is at this point that we really get to ground ourselves back in the reason for being here. What is it? What is it? Because it is so easy to show up, to listen, and then when the camera goes off and you're no longer hearing me, we just get back into what I have come to term head down, bum up mode. So we're going through the motions of our life. And quite often it is the greatest gift to our life when we have a major interruption. Unfortunately, those major interruptions can often come in the way of things that feel really difficult, the challenges in life. But it is the interruption, it is the gift in those interruptions that often send us on a different trajectory. There is that awakening, that moment where we stick our head back up out of head down, bum up mode, and we're forced to pick a new direction or to change course. I know, good morning, Marg. I know one of the greatest upheavals in my life, good morning, Liz. One of the greatest upheavals in my life was absolutely one of the greatest gifts in my life as well. I didn't see it at the time. In fact, it probably took me a few years to really understand the gift in it. And from memory, it was the wise words of one of my mentors that just caused this radical shift in my perspective. The event was when my first husband literally packed a bag and walked away, and I had 4 children under 8. I wasn't working. We had a farm, a small farm on the outskirts of Bendigo, for those near between Bendigo and Castlemaine, for those that know Victoria. And suddenly I was faced as a sole care parent with the responsibility of everything, of every decision. And until I had got to that point in my life, I had made everybody else the expert in my life because I never had the confidence to really believe that I was the one that could make the right choices. Everybody else knew more, had some secret knowing that I hadn't yet grasped. And I think a lot of us can walk through life with this childlike desire, this childlike wanting for somebody to give us permission, for somebody to validate us, for somebody to say, hey, you're doing a great job, for somebody else to give us the qualification, for somebody else to say, you are now worthy. And I still catch myself in that position at some times when I launch something into the world and I want validation from other people to say it's good. We can get caught in it. But it is the ability to give yourself permission. I'll never forget the gorgeous Brene Brown talking about writing herself permission slips, like she used to write for her kids. It is that giving yourself permission. You are the one who decides if you are worthy. You are the one that decides if you are qualified. And if we think about this life journey that we've been on till this moment in time, we have done tens of thousands of hours of learning all sorts of different skills, but most of all, learning how to be a human, how to be a person that we feel proud of, how to be a friend, how to be, so whatever the career paths. And for a lot of us, it's many career paths. I've done everything from hospitality, my coyote ugly moment for anyone that knows the movie of dancing on bars and pouring drinks. And I've been in real estate. I've been an office manager. I've been a secretary. I've done legal secretary. I've been a flower farmer. I've been a talk show host. I've been a coach. I've been a naturopath. I've been a mum for nearly 24 years now. There's a lot of roles. There's a lot of hats. And if I kept looking for somebody else to tell me that I was qualified to do all those things, that I was worthy, there's so many of them I wouldn't have done. When I think about buying the flower farm, it was just a leap of faith, a trust in myself. When I think about when I did my first talk show, it was simply a leap of faith and a trust in myself, and I learned along the way. And I think this is one of the greatest lessons that we really get to understand in ourselves, that we're all starting somewhere with everything. We're all starting somewhere, and it is that audacity, it is that bravery, it is that trust in yourself, that faith that you're on the right path, that you're listening to the messages from within, the internal wisdom that says, go here, give this a go. So I started this little chapter of what I want to share with you by saying the greatest gifts in the hardest times, in the interruptions, because when my first husband walked away and I had 4 children under 8, I had to pull up my big girl pants. I was responsible. I could no longer be turning to somebody else to be the expert. I could no longer lean on anybody else. I was leaning on me. And it really was the greatest gift. And it happened in incremental steps. I spent a lot of time in victim mode. I've spent a lot of time saying, well, I'm this tired and I'm this poor and I'm this everything because this happened. It gave me the perfect excuse to have one foot in and one foot out. It gave me the perfect excuse to have one foot in and one foot out. For everything that I didn't want to be all in on, I was able to blame on that moment when he walked away. And as I came to realize we're all responsible for our own lives, we're all responsible for where we are. We can choose to be a victim of nothing. That was when I understood what it is to be an empowered woman. For anyone that needs to hear that again, that is what it means to be an empowered woman. It's not about perfection. It's not about getting it all right. It's about taking responsibility. If I am going to be a happy, healthy woman, the only person who is responsible for that is me. If it is to be, it's up to me. I've got all these fabulous bumper stickers that I share with my clients. And this is a big one. If it is to be, it's up to me. If I'm not really happy, if I'm not loving the life I live, if I'm not feeling purposeful, if I'm not feeling fulfilled, if my life isn't rich with meaning, it's up to me to make it so. When I think about the legacy that I want to leave on this planet, it's how I want to make people feel. When I leave, people come and go from my world all the time. I want them to think about me and say, I felt better for being in her presence. That's the intention that I set. I want people to feel safe around me, safe to be authentic with all the messy bits, all the bits we get to celebrate, the times we've fallen flat on our faces, got up again, dusted off. It's for all of it. And it's not that I am anything more special. We are all equal, just different. But it is in this proactive way of thinking. It's the responsible way of being that allows us to decide I don't think we're really in charge of our destiny. I think that is up to a higher source. I do think that we are all here for a reason, but we can take charge of who we're being along the way. We can take charge. We can be responsible for that. So if we're walking through life going, well, of course I'm not happy because this person did that to me and that person said that, and I haven't got enough money, and I don't live in the right house, and I'm not in the right suburb, and I haven't got the right clothes, and I wanted that job, but nobody would give it to me, or this person broke my heart. This person did that. They're all valid. They're all reasons to feel sad. They're all reasons to feel not good enough. I was rubbish at school. I was bullied. They're all reasons. They're all valid. But we can decide to change the story. We can decide, okay, so what do I want to learn from this? We look at it through a lens of curiosity, and then we get to go, okay, so who do I want to be? How do I want people to feel when they're around me? Do I want everyone around me to feel like they have to prop me up? Yes, we can lean shoulder to shoulder when things are really tough, because they get tough for all of us at some point along the way. They get really tough. We know this. We've been doing this journey called life for long enough to know that there are times when things are horrendously tough. And we get to lean on people. We get to ask for help. I think it was Fiona said in the Facebook group this morning about understanding that ability to ask for help doesn't make us weak. It doesn't make us lesser than, all equal, just different. And the more we can lean on each other as women, the more we can really step into the fullness of being the most authentic and highest expression of who we are to be, here to be. And that gives me, when I think about that, it gives me that feeling of being pulled up and forward, which is what I want for all of us. I believe it was Tony Robbins who said, if we're not growing, we're dying. It's so easy to get in this kind of plateau mode. It's like everything's working. I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to be uncomfortable. I know what I'm here to do. I know what I can do each day. There's tiny tweaks that get to happen along the way. Sometimes I need to decide that I'm not going to have a glass of wine every night. Sometimes I need to decide that I probably should exercise a bit more. Or sometimes I get to decide, it's like these little tweaks. But there are moments, there are opportunities when we go, do you know what? And as I say this, I think about our beautiful community member, Janet, yesterday was talking about, being a grandmother, a mother to adult children and a grandmother. And I think about that role of being a matriarch in our society, and it makes me straighten my spine. It makes me feel like there is a role here that is so valuable. There is no putting a price on being an extraordinary role model. To be the matriarch of a community, to be the matriarch of a family, that's like she's somebody I want to grow to be. To make looking like being in your 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 100. I saw a post this morning. I follow Iris Apfel, who's about to turn 102. That's the second person. So this gorgeous woman who wrote The Well-Lived Life that I've referred to a couple of times, Dr. Gladys McGarry, she's 102. Iris Apfel, for anyone that doesn't know who she is, if you want somebody extraordinary to look at, she's a fashion icon. They've made Barbies out of her. One day I'll talk about my thoughts about the Barbie movie. But anyway, she's fabulous. role models. Be a role model. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how old you are. You can be a role model when you're 3 to children that are smaller. They look up. You know, I remember my first steps into this entrepreneurial world, and I found myself in America. Still don't know how I've done half the things I've done in my life. There's just this leap of faith. But I found myself in America sitting in an audience looking at this stage of 5 women who were, you know, in an audience. There was 800 women in the audience at the time, and looking at these women, and they were so real in the extraordinary success that they'd had, their generosity of spirit in the things that they were teaching people. It's that sense of reaching out a hand and pulling people up and forward. They were those kind of women. And I remember looking up at the stage, feeling like the little girl in primary school again, looking up at the high school girls going, oh, I want to grow up to be like that. That's who I want to be. You know, we get these pictures of people who are doing extraordinary things that we can look up to. And I went home and I put on my vision board that I was going to be on that stage the following year. No idea how I did it. I was at almost zero income, zero business. I went out and started cleaning people's houses so that I could afford to pay for the coach to show me how to do that. And the next year I was on that stage in America, in a different country, in front of 1,000 other entrepreneurs that were looking up at me. I got to be that role model. And that gives me great pride. If there was one person that I impacted, that when I want to be like, you know, there's a picture. I don't want to be her, but I want to do that. That's given me a picture. So as mothers, as grandmothers, as extraordinary women in the workforce, as women in our community, we're all role modeling something. I'm about to introduce you to the gorgeous Ruth Hotson in a second. Ruth and my paths have crossed for years, and I reached out to Ruth to speak to us today, and it didn't dawn on me until we actually started speaking on a Zoom who she was. But one of the mentors in my life who I have followed and studied under and known for many years now is Cindy O'Meara. And Cindy and I have a connection through family connection and have spent quite a lot of time together. I have interviewed her a few times. I'm sure a lot of the people in this community will know Cindy. And every time I would reach out to Cindy, I would be talking to this lovely woman via email called Ruth. And for years, I think, as I was in the first cohort that went through Cindy's Nutrition Academy. I can't even remember when that was. Maybe it was 2016. I don't know. Anyway, it was a while ago. And and then interviewing Cindy on different shows and so on. And then I reached out to this amazing woman who talks about kinesiology and tapping. And I was like, oh, you know, like, would you like to be on part of this series? And then I saw her and we were talking. I was like, oh my goodness, that's how I know you, Ruth. So welcome, Ruth. Thank you so much for being with us, honey.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited for this interview. So today we are super, super blessed. Ruth is going to take us through a tapping exercise in a little bit. And for those who are in the Facebook group, if you would like to be here with us on Zoom, please, I think Gia has popped a link in there. You will come into a waiting room, but Gia will let you in when you come in if you want to join us for that. So Ruth is here to talk to us about unlocking that potential. So yes, I've talked about this, you know, this feeling of the woman that you want to be, but there are all these little pieces that stop us from stepping into the next stage, the next level, the next iteration of the woman that we are here to be. And I'd like to give you some context for this conversation, because when Ruth and I started talking, as you will know, the inspiration for this series came from a book called Lost Connections by Johann Hari. And in that book, he talks about connection to childhood trauma. And I ummed and ahed about having this conversation. I feel like in the online space, particularly, there is so much focus on trauma and the things that we can get really stuck in. And it is that, these things happen to me, and that's why I can't move forward. And it's not that it's not valid. It is. I'm not dismissing these experiences by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think we can get stuck in them because I've been there. I've been stuck in them, and I know how long it can hold us back. So when I reached out to Ruth, I was like, how do we have this conversation in a way that pulls people up and forward rather than feeling stuck in this conversation? So Ruth is very generously going to share her wisdom with us in how to do this. But before we dive in, I want to cover a couple of different things. One is I would love you to explain to our audience what kinesiology is and as a modality that they can use. We'll get into tapping as well. But before we get there, would you give us a little picture? I love to start these interviews with a little story into who you are and how you came to be doing the work that you now do, Ruth.
Thanks. Sure. So like you said, I worked for Cindy. I was working with Cindy. I had moved to Australia after, as you can probably tell my accent, I'm English. I was doing a job in England that I felt very trapped in, very stuck in. I hated what I was doing. It was what I'd done my degree in. I'd done my degree in textiles, so I'd worked really hard, and I'd worked to the point of getting myself to kind of as a sales executive, and I was really hating it. And I was just like, oh, what do I do now? I've worked so hard to get here, and this is not what I want it to be. And it wasn't long after the financial crash, so moving and changing careers was really hard. And I just went, do you know what? I'm going to go to Australia for a year. My sister lived over here. I was like, I'm going to go to Australia for a year, give myself a year to try and work out what the hell I want to do with my life and see what happens. While I was here, I got a job working with Cindy, and I'd always had an interest in nutrition because I'd suffered with digestive problems. So I'd had digestive issues since I was 15. And working with Cindy, obviously learned so much about food and learned so much about sort of how to nourish myself, but I still suffered with those digestive issues. I was still having those problems. And obviously, as you know, Cindy sort of talks so much more about just nutrition. She talks about mindset and everything like that. And someone has said to me, maybe you should go and see a kinesiologist. And I'd heard of this years ago when I was 18. There was this amazing woman who would tell you what foods you could and couldn't eat by pressing on your arm. And it sounded amazing, but at 18, my financial priorities were going out, having fun with my friends, buying new clothes, not going and paying £200 to go and see this woman to press on my arm. And I'm actually really grateful I didn't do that at 18, because I'm not sure it would have had the profound effect on my life that it did when I went so many years later after suffering with that for 17 years. And so someone suggested I went to see a kinesiologist. I went to see her. She explained to me how there was all these different elements that it actually, by that point, it was nothing to do with the food. It was more events that had happened earlier on in my life that was meaning I was holding and storing that emotion in my body and preventing my digestive system from working. And through doing that session, I'm a very curious person. I need to understand things to be able to accept them. And so I went down the route of wanting to understand it a little bit more. And the more I learned, the more I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I have to know how to share this with other people. So that was my journey into kinesiology.
Yeah. I love introducing people to these new modalities, and it's interesting because when that need to understand how things work, and it's taken me a long time to get here with energy stuff, because when I studied naturopathy, there was an invitation to do homeopathic studies as well. I was like, naturopathy I can pick up the herbs, I can make the tinctures, I can see these, it was tangible. And so that worked for my brain. The homeopathy, I couldn't get my head around this idea of the energy, and I know it works. I've used it in, with my children with teething, and they never had anything but homeopathics and natural remedies for most of their childhood. And so it is only in more recent times that I've really become much more connected to these energy modalities, which naturopathy obviously is as well. I just didn't realize it.
Well, that's it, isn't it? We differentiate things. We put them in different boxes and go, okay, this makes sense. I understand this. This doesn't make sense. It's a bit too weird. And
yeah. And I think it is that there is this process that gets to happen, whether we're thinking about it in terms of spirit or God or Mother Nature or what, we want to be able to physically put our hands on things. And I think this is the scientific world that we've kind of been raised in, is that you've got to be able to touch it and see it, otherwise it doesn't exist. But thankfully I've moved past that. But Ruth, tell us a little bit more about what kinesiology actually is and who it supports.
Okay. So kinesiology was actually developed by a chiropractor in America in the 70s. He started to make a connection between people having muscle pain or pain in particular areas, and they were also going through similar emotional challenges. So he started to see this correlation between physical ailments and emotional ailments. And when he started to delve into it, he realized it correlated with the information that we have in acupuncture, meridian systems, and Chinese medicine. So each meridian has muscles associated with it and emotions associated with it. And so what he found was by using a muscle response, by pressing on, activating a muscle and then pressing on it, he could ask the body questions and find out how well that meridian was functioning. So that was where it started. It was only at that time for other professionals like chiropractors, physios, etc. And then there was a gentleman who came along and said, this is too valuable for it not to be shared more broadly, because they were using it sort of as a side of what they were doing. And so he developed what was called Touch for Health, which is now kinesiology, where someone comes in for a session, the muscle response is a way of asking the body how it's functioning. So the muscle tells us when there's a stress in the body. So whether that's physical, emotional, nutritional, or spiritual. And then from that, we can also use that muscle response to find out, okay, what's going to help to bring balance back to the body? How can we bring more balance back? As a modality, it's one of those frustrating modalities where it's like, it can actually be used on anything because we're testing a stress response in the body. So similar to EFT, which we're going to talk about today. The main area that I work in is I work with people with stress and anxiety. So people who have a lot of anxiety, adults, children, I help them to kind of work through releasing that stress, because I believe when we have anxiety, that's one of the things that stops us from being our most authentic version of ourselves. It's we limit ourselves, we block ourselves off from so much. And the joy that I get from seeing people being able to do things that they never thought they could purely because of their mindset is just something that I absolutely love.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we think about this in terms of unlocking people's potential, let's look at it from that aspect. So how do you address that?
So I'd love to. So Gary Craig, who developed EFT, created a theory that he talks about, or a sort of concept that he talks about that I think encapsulates this really well. It's called the Palace of Possibility. And he believes that we are all born into this palace with endless possibility. Every room in the palace is a different possibility or different thing that's available to us. And he says that as we go through life, things happen that mean we start to close the door on those possibilities. So an event happens, we create a belief, we have an interaction, we have a role in our family, we have a role in with our friends, with our communities. And those beliefs that we start to create mean that we start to close doors in this palace. So going from having endless possibility of everything in the world available to us, we can end up in this tiny little space in the middle of that palace, not realizing what is capable and what we have available to us. So then in that situation, we dismiss opportunities, We don't see opportunities. So in that example you were saying, Edwina, when you're looking up on those people on that stage, if the belief is really strong, we don't even think that it's possible we can be on that stage. That you had no idea how you were going to make it happen, but the possibility was there. And the big thing is, it's not about probability, it's about possibility. So it doesn't matter whether it's a 1% chance this could happen or a 99% chance this happen. If I think it's possible, my brain is then open to looking for opportunities that can help me to bring that to life. I'm motivated to try and find things. And it's easier when I don't think it can happen, even when the universe is pushing and trying to make it happen. I make it harder because I'm trying to steer myself away from it. Yeah. And I think a really good visual of this is if we think about an elephant that's been captured and it's got a chain around its ankle, that elephant can easily break that chain and be back into freedom whenever it wants. But because its brain does not know that, it doesn't know that that's a possibility, it doesn't know that it's capable of doing that, that elephant stays in that captivity. And that's what we do to ourselves. Yeah. We chain ourselves up because we don't realize what we are capable of. We don't realize what we have the capacity of experiencing. And so we don't even try.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you know, it's interesting that you bring up that story. There's a few women in here that Lizzie is nodding that are part of my a mastermind that I'm running in the Emboldened Women's Mastermind. And I had a dream earlier this year that rocked me to my core. And it was a really violent dream against elephants. I was like, where did this come from? What on earth is going on? I just felt so shaken by it. And in a meditation, that exact story came to me of the baby elephant that is tethered and then just stops trying to let go, stops trying to move. And I was like, there is something in my life that is tethered. I'm still tethered. And it was one of those, I started this whole process with talking about these moments that happen, that just the interruptions to our head down, bum up mode when we're just kind of plowing through life. And it was actually one of those. And you've just brought that story up again. Yeah.
So interesting, because I went walking my dog this morning, that just popped into my head. I'm like, oh, I'm going to share that. I have no idea where that thought came from, but the elephant popped into my head and I went, there you go. So we must have been connecting there.
We're all connected. We're all connected. And I love that you talk about those possibilities, because that's exactly, that is my passion, is planting the seeds of possibility. And through us sharing our stories and our conversations and these ideas and these different modalities, we're just planting these seeds of possibility that people can try on. It's lovely work to be doing.
And the brain likes things to be simple. So if it's like, no, that can't happen, why waste any time or any energy on it? Great. And I think we spoke about this, and we know what was quite interesting when I was doing some EFT training and they discussed this concept. And what was quite interesting was they felt the need to say Gary Craig was a white middle-class man. So obviously for him, the opportunities that were available to him were very different. Yeah. And I get race, gender, money, geographical, all of those things have an impact on our life. But as I said, this is about possibility, not probability. And when those beliefs mean we shut the door, rather than thinking, yes, there's people out there who I'm gonna have to change their belief systems in order to get to where I want to. But when we use those as a way to shut the door, then we're shutting the door on that possibility. And of course, things have an impact on how easy it might be, but we know that things are possible for people from all walks of life, from all different places. So it's really important that I felt that actually limited people, that idea of limiting people was rather than helping people.
Yeah, it's so powerful. It's so powerful. In the Reconnection Revolution's 3Cs community that is running in conjunction with this, I gave the women in there an exercise on day one, and that is about looking at the experience that rise in your memory from right from birth, from day dot, because there's so many clues in there. And as you were talking about the doors closing, I've got such a vivid memory of being in probably grade 4 or 5 and being given an exercise by our art teacher to draw a snowman. And I remember drawing the snowman, and then a girlfriend that I was sitting next to, I can still remember, Debbie, was drawing snowflakes. I was like, they're so pretty. These kind of lines of snowflakes. And I started drawing them and ended up with a lot all over the picture. And the art teacher was quite dismissive of it and scathing. And I can remember feeling really embarrassed. And that was the moment I decided I was no good at art. That was a door closing moment. And I spent the rest of my life until my children started in a Steiner school, which is a very creative, artistic school, and I started quietly, secretly playing with drawing again and fell in love with it. But that was a door closing moment, and it might seem really insignificant, but we all have these moments. And I just love the picture that you've given, Ruth, because I think that's if we can allow those memories to rise up and look at them through that perspective, I think it's really powerful.
And I think it's remembering that we shut those doors for valid reasons. So there's a benefit to closing those doors on a subconscious level. The main reasons are often safety. So in that, the teacher was critical. The way she responded or reacted to you didn't feel good, didn't feel positive.
Yeah.
And as a small child, we're like, okay, well, I don't want to experience that again. And I experienced that because of my art. So therefore, if I don't do art, I can avoid that situation. Yep. So as a child, that's what we're telling ourselves, you know. And often that's the thing, when we think about what makes us close the door, we have to remember what resources did I have at the age at which it happened. Because we're often thinking of like, that's not a very significant thing, because we're thinking of it now from our adult brain. Yeah. But if this situation happened to me, and an example I'll often use is if I'm like 2 or 3 and I get bitten by a dog, as a 2 or 3-year-old, that's quite terrifying. Yeah. I can then decide I'm going to avoid dogs for the rest of my life. And so I'm now an adult in my 40s, still terrified and avoiding dogs. And if I see a dog, I'm crossing the street. And that the way that I've chose to store that information in that one event, then has that continual impact for the rest of my life. And what's fantastic about EFT is it allows us to change how that information is stored. Yeah. So I can, instead of going, dogs are terrifying, I must avoid them forever, I can change that to, I need to be mindful around dogs because they can be aggressive. Or I can even get to the point where I can go, that was an unfortunate event. And I can understand why my 2 or 3-year-old was scared, but I'm now an adult. I now have different resources to be able to help and keep me safe. Yep. One of the other big things I think, which really connects to what we're talking about, is identity is a huge reason why we close those doors. So connection as a human is hardwired into our DNA. It is about survival. Yep. So I know as a baby, the only way I'm going to stay alive is by creating a strong bond with another human who is capable of taking care of me. And so that is so important to me and to all humans, that I will allow my own needs to be dismissed if it's going to influence the connection that I have with that caretaker. So whether that's a parent, it might be a teacher in school, it might be sort of friends, siblings. And so what happens is when we want to be our authentic self, it's if no one around me was going to have any judgment, any opinion, anything at all, who would I really be? But because it's unlikely that everybody around us is going to have no opinion, no judgment, or be impacted in some way, we then tweak ourselves to fit into what we think we need to in order for people to connect with us. And the irony of that is we actually generally connect less or our connections aren't as strong when we're not being ourselves. Because I think most people can feel when someone isn't being genuine.
Yeah.
And so what we're doing to try and help ourselves to connect is actually often causing us to not connect as well as we could.
Yeah. Yeah, Brene Brown talks about it in the difference between fitting in and belonging. So fitting in is that morphing of who you are to fit the surroundings that you're in, and to try and wear the right clothes and, whatever it might be. And belonging is where you get to be unapologetically yourself, that authentic space. And it's, for a lot of us, it takes a great deal of practice and courage and the willingness to be vulnerable, to extend the circles in which we have that sense of belonging. But the more we all do it, the more we give other people permission to do it, and the ripple effect gets to be that we all feel like we belong in this world rather than struggling to fit in, which is a magic thing.
Definitely.
Ruth, I would love you've mentioned EFT. So if we can just give our audience a little bit more of a picture of what that actually is and who uses it and how you use it. And then maybe we'll go through a little exercise to give people a taste of it.
Perfect. So EFT is emotional freedom techniques. What we're doing, it's often called tapping because that is what we're doing. We are tapping on acupressure points around the body, and as we tap on those points, it's actually been shown it starts to reduce our cortisol levels, so our stress response, and it also starts to reduce how much our amygdala is firing. So the amygdala is the part of the brain that tells me how safe I am. So that's the alert system that tells me whether I'm safe, and so I can be relaxed, whether I'm in danger. And as that amygdala starts to sort of, if I think of it like, red, amber, green, as we start sort of creeping up towards that red, when we hit that red zone, that's when we go into default mode, because our frontal lobe, so our ration, our logic, our reasoning goes offline because it's purely about survival. So that's when I make decisions, and afterwards I go, why the hell did I do that? What was I like, that's not how. It's because I've gone into very, very basic survival mode. And what makes the decisions in those modes is what's happened to me before and how did I get out of it. So I'm often going back to previous events, and I may not have had the most useful experiences in the past to be using as a reference.
Yeah.
So in EFT, what we can do is we can calm down that amygdala, so I'm still able to make a logical choice. And we can start to actually change, as we were saying, how I have stored that information. So if we think about the dog, we can go from, oh my God, dogs are terrifying. There's a dog. Oh my God, I'm so scared. To, okay, there's a dog. Maybe I just need to be mindful. So we can actually change how the brain, how important the brain has decided an event is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. And I've already just thought about something that I want to learn to do tapping on. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So if we think about the emotion, so the amygdala really responds to emotion. So the higher the emotion during an event, the more the brain goes, this is really important. I need to remember everything about this event. And if we think about sort of, it works on a positive and a negative. If we think about, if someone's married, if I ask you, what meal did you have for your wedding? Most people can remember all of the details around that, can't they? Whereas if I ask you, what did you have for dinner on the 17th of August, 1982, you're like, I've got no idea. So it's a specific event with a heightened emotion. Our brain goes, this is really important and I need to remember this. So what we are able to do during tapping is start to neutralize the emotional attachment to a negative event. As we neutralize and bring down the emotional attachment that event has, its importance, and therefore how much we reference back to it, starts to diminish. The memory does not go. So in your case, you would still remember being that child painting, but as we start to neutralize how that child felt when the teacher came over, we just have a memory.
Yeah.
There isn't an emotional peak.
So if you have a trigger, but you don't know the origin of it, does it still work?
Yes, so that is actually where tapping comes in it's one of the best bits about tapping, because it allows us to get to the origin. So the amygdala sits next to our hippocampus. Our hippocampus is our memory center. As we reduce how much the amygdala is firing, our hippocampus very kindly just gives us that little bit of information. And so one of the main things that happens as someone's tapping is they're tapping going, oh, I don't know. And suddenly a little memory, a little flash or a little image pops in. And it's like, right, that's where this has come from. Whether it makes sense to us or not, sometimes people go, I have no idea why this is what, but there will be some emotional connection. So if we think about the way that our brain stores information, it's mostly on emotion.
Yep.
So it made me scared. All right, there's my drawer of all the events that made me feel scared. It made me feel useless. Here's my drawer. So there will be something emotionally normally that will correlate between the two. So yes, when we don't know, that is when tapping is perfect, because it helps us to access those memories to be able to kind of go, right. And it's one of the reasons it can be very useful, particularly for when we are working through sort of things that are traumatic. We can do it quite slowly and just kind of like peel back the onion gently, rather than sometimes, you know, we want to dive straight in. Go, well, I know that's what's caused it. And it's like, yes, but if we've put something in to keep us safe, if I want to be able to remove that, I need to either tell myself I don't need to be kept safe anymore because I'm not under threat, or I need to replace that mechanism. So if someone feels terrified, you can't just try and take that away. You've got to replace it or make them feel safe, one of the two.
It's, you know, I've got a great love of language, and it's interesting. Every now and then I realize I've heard something a lot of times, but I haven't really sunk into the meaning of it. And emotional freedom technique, now it's just kind of landed in my brain. It's freeing yourself from the emotions that have hooked you in a feeling of feeling unsafe or humiliated or embarrassed or whatever that is. It's getting the freedom from that wiring come in.
And I get an example of sort of a belief that I created. So I grew up in a family where we didn't have a huge amount of money. And there was a moment where a bailiff came and knocked on the door. I was a young child. I was hiding underneath the table with my mum and my sister. So then they didn't know that we were there. And in that moment, I told myself, I am always going to make sure I have enough money to pay for my basics, to be able to cover my rent, my bills, my food. That was I made that promise to myself, so then I would never be in that situation again. I didn't want to be so scared, and I wanted that to be the case. And as I got older, the amount of money obviously varied, you know, childhood, different, student, different. And so as we go along, that money, I would have an amount. As long as I have that much, I'm safe. Now, what started to happen was I could get to that amount quite easy. But as soon as I hit that amount, something would happen and come and take away a big chunk of my money. So I'd have like an unexpected accident with my car, or I'd have a bill that I wasn't expecting, or, you know, so I would hit the goal. And then it was almost like, because I want to make sure I've got just enough. And so it was then going, oh gosh, just seeing what Janet just said. What are the chances? And so what I had to do was I had to change I had to first of all neutralize that original event, because that child understandably was scared. So I had to go and do some work on that. So then that part of me, my inner child at that specific moment in time, did not feel scared. And that's how we use tapping, and I can show you that. And then what I had to do was allow, once I felt calm enough and I felt safe enough, I could change that goal of, this is the minimum amount of money I have in my life, or I always have enough money to be able to provide. And it started to shift and change. So then it wasn't sort of almost, because it was working towards hitting that goal had almost become like a way of making myself feel safe. So it's like, oh, I've almost got the right amount. I've almost got, and then it was like, okay, well, now I've got it. Now I don't know what to do. Like that, it was almost like my body didn't know how to deal with that emotion of, okay, the money's there. Now what? Now what? So I was stuck in that emotional circle of making sure I had enough money. Okay, I feel safe. And then it was almost like, okay, well, I need something to work towards. Okay, well, let's take some of that money away. And now, does that make sense?
Yeah.
I was trapped in that emotion.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. And I can see this pattern. I can see this pattern in myself where it's come up in different times. And I can absolutely see this pattern in clients that I've worked with as well. It's that just enough.
Yeah.
It's like you hit a wall. And it's like, and there's elements of it being a worthy. This is what I'm worth, and I can't kind of see my worth beyond this marker. But you've just given it another perspective as well, which is really interesting.
And there's often a concept that they talk about in EFT is the tabletop and the table legs. So like, the tabletop is the thing that we're working on. So I don't have enough money.
Yeah.
And then there's all these legs that support that belief, that hold it into place. So that event as a child, then there's moments, obviously being a student where we were struggling for money, et cetera, et cetera. And so each one of those legs then comes in and slots into place under that table, giving that more and more support. And so then it's kind of going, I'm trying to go, okay, why have I not got enough money? And it's because it's like, there's so many things that have happened that reinforce that belief system.
Yeah.
And because it's a belief system I have, I'm looking for evidence, I'm looking for proof to show me that I'm right.
I think there's a show brewing on a conversation around money. It's, and we can have a chat about that. I just think it's such an important conversation because it touches everything. It touches every decision we make. And I think, particularly for women, we've been raised with so many beliefs around money and what money is, and our worthiness around money, and, greed, and not wanting too much. And, my coach has a beautiful saying that is, money in my hands is good for the world. And I think as conscious women, the more money we have, the greater impact we can have on all the things that really make a difference. So
yeah, if we go back to three of the biggest things that keep a belief in place, safety, identity, and how deserving we feel we are of it. Money, obviously, on all of those levels. Safety is a huge thing. If we don't have money, it is about our basic needs: shelter, food. Identity, if I change the financial bracket that I'm in compared to my friends, my family, etc., it has an impact. And so branching out of that is definitely going to impact on my identity. And deserving, how deserving do we feel of money? Because the beliefs or things that we hear, we know, but growing up, money doesn't grow on trees. Oh, people who have money, oh, they're horrible. We have so many negative connotations around these things. And that's when we talk about these doors, sometimes the things that close these doors are obvious. They're really big traumatic events. And so it can be really clear why that door was closed. But there can also be really small things that mean that we close doors, because it's just things that we just hear all the time and don't even necessarily think about, like even somebody the other day who has gone through a separation, and they were kind of like, they actually said, I feel like I should be struggling because they were a single parent. And that was because that's a concept or a belief that we have in our society. And they felt guilty that they weren't. And so these little sort of beliefs that are just around us all the time impact how we think we should be living our life. Yeah.
It's another little bumper sticker that I use with my clients is, we are meaning making machines. Every event is neutral. Every event is neutral. We apply meaning to it. The example that I was using, because it was very relevant, because my daughter was born 2 days after it happened, was 9/11. And those planes flying into those buildings, those people being killed, there were people on this planet that applied the meaning that was a good thing. that they were deserving. It was time for America to have a wake-up call. You know, there was people on this planet that saw it as a good thing, and there's people on this planet that saw it was the most devastating thing that ever happened. The event is neutral. We apply meaning. When somebody says something to us, we all know we get triggered by a parent that has the eye raise, and it's to somebody else it means nothing, but to the child it's like, oh, there's this whole meaning that is applied to it. So yeah, I think when we can use emotional freedom technique to look at the meanings that we've applied to these things and how it's locked in our potential to live the fullest expression of who we're here to be, that's a really, I'm excited by that, because it's simple, it's usable, it's things that we can do, it's something that we can really practice.
Yeah.
So I'd love you to take us through a little exercise.
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to talk you through the points. So I want you to actually tap with me as we go through the points, because as we said, as we're tapping on these points, it's going to calm down our nervous system. So whenever we're feeling stressed, we can use this to help to bring, they did an experiment on this where they tested the cortisol levels in people's saliva. After an hour of tapping, their cortisol levels are dropped by about 45%. Like huge. I'm not saying you have to sit and tap for an hour, but this is something that you can use when we're feeling stressed. Before I came on here, because I still get a little bit nervous sometimes when I do these things, I sat and I tapped, and I can feel the difference that it makes. So we start, these are on both sides of the body. I'm left-handed, so I use my left hand. It doesn't matter. So we start by tapping on the side of the hand, so the fleshy part of your hand, just below your little finger. From there, we come up and we tap at the start of our eyebrow. You can do both, you can do one, it doesn't matter. Then we tap at the side of the eye. Then we tap underneath our eye. Then we tap underneath our nose. Then underneath our lip. And then we're tapping, it's in between your collarbone and your first rib. Just this point here. Underneath our arm where our bra strap is. I'm talking to all women, so I can use that reference nice and easily. And then right on the top of the head. So the points that we're tapping are the start or end points of meridians, so acupressure points. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add in some words. So as I said, emotions is really important. So the way that we start this is we think about, okay, think of a belief that you have. What emotion does it make you feel that you have that belief? So that feeling of I never have enough money made me feel frustrated. So that's the example that I'm going to use. So what's the belief that you have, and what's the emotion that it makes you feel? So then what we do is we go to the side of our hand and we tap on the side of our hand, and we would say, even though I feel frustrated, so whatever the emotion is, that I have this belief that I won't have enough money, I accept that's how I feel. So it's the emotion, why, and an acceptance. And I repeat that 3 times on the side of my hand. And I'll put the link in. I've got a video that you can tap along and follow along, because I know this is a lot of information to take in a short round. So even though I'm frustrated because I feel like I'll never have enough money, I accept that's how I feel. Even though I feel frustrated because I feel like I'll never have enough money, I accept that's how I feel. So we repeat that sentence 3 times on the side of the hand. And then we come up and go through the points, and I'm just reminding myself of the emotion and why. I'm frustrated, side of the eye, because I feel like I'll never have enough money. Under the eye, I'm frustrated. Under the nose, because I feel like I'll never have enough money. Under the lip, I'm frustrated. Collarbone, because I feel like I'll never have enough money. Under the arm, I'm frustrated. Top of the head, because I feel like I'll never have enough money. And then what I'm doing is I'm checking in. Am I still frustrated? Or has the emotion changed? Is it something else now? Am I now sad that I'll never have enough money? has the intensity or the level of that emotion started to reduce? So we're kind of, that's normally the sign that we're looking for. As the emotion starts to come down, remember, if we're like red, amber, green, so we want to kind of bring it down. While I'm in the red, I'm not being very logical. I'm not really going to be able to do very much in that space. As I start to come down into amber and moving into the green, my brain is much more open to, it's what's called a juxtaposition. As I think about something that causes me a stress or a negative emotion, and I add in these tapping points that creates like a calming sensation, I get into this middle position where I can now go, okay, how do I want to change how I am acting or feeling towards this belief or this memory? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. That's amazing. So you've got a way for the women to have you got a gift for them that they can
it's a video that you can tap along with.
Okay.
So I'll send the link to Edwina. So you can just go in, and it's a video, it's a 15-minute video that talks you through how to use tapping to start working through our beliefs, the sort of like the different stages that we want to go through. And I give you some wording and some examples that you can, and what you want to do is, it's a framework, but what we know in tapping is the wording that we use is what's going to activate your amygdala to work. So it's important to kind of make sure, I give you examples, but you put in the words that are right for you. So for example, if Edwina was doing the one about the school, when the art teacher came over, it might be like, I felt really sad. And so then she'd just be like, even though I felt really sad because the art teacher didn't like my work, I accept that's how I feel. And so you just change, the recipe is the same. It's what's the emotion, why do we have the emotion, and how do we accept that? How do we accept ourselves even though we have this emotion? Because I think that's the big thing, isn't it? Often I'm not allowed to have emotions. I shouldn't feel that way, or it's not okay to feel that way. And by doing that, it starts to neutralize. Yeah. It may bring up memories, and I've told you in the video how to then work on those memories as well.
Amazing. That's so good. That's so exciting. I'll pop it in the link into an email, and it can also go on this video that's going out in the Facebook group, as well as it up on YouTube and so on. So that'll be easy to find. For those that want to, I saw a counsellor 18 years ago suggested tapping when I was having issues with ex-husband. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's been around for a long time. And I know a lot of the women in this community, I know there's a lot of women in this community there from Kim Morrison's community as well, and she uses it. It's it's very powerful.
And like I said, if anything, if the only thing is learn the points, and then in the moment when you are feeling really heightened emotion, use the points, and it just brings you back into that green zone so much faster. And in doing so, if you do that after something has just happened, we're neutralizing the emotion actually in the event itself, and therefore not storing it and having to go back and work on it years later.
Amazing. So good. So good. Thank you, Ruth. For people that want to get in touch with you, perhaps to get a little more guidance, is that something that you can do virtually or only?
Yeah. So I'd work with people all over the world. So that's the wonderful thing about tapping, is because you're using your hands, so it's super simple to use online. So my business is findingbalancekinesiology.com. So you can either Facebook, Instagram, or my website, all the same, findingbalancekinesiology.com. You can find me there. Or I have an unusual name. If you just type in Ruth Hotson, you will generally find me. The good thing about having an unusual name.
It is. I have a daughter who's Hermione, and her whole life it's like the Harry Potter thing. But she's actually, we haven't come across another Hermione. She's it's lovely having an unusual name. It helps.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for doing this. I think, the connection with ourselves and with other people is so, so important, and it's something that's really undervalued in life. And I think to create a space where people can come together and have this connection is so important. So thank you for your time and effort in putting this together.
Pleasure. It's an absolute pleasure. All right, everybody. Well, this is officially the last of the interviews for this particular series. In the 3Cs community, we are going to be continuing the work. And in that community, if you haven't joined us until now, there is the opportunity for, I'm going to be taking you through like a vision quest. So we're going to be first for this first series, you'll be supported to create this clear vision of the most authentic and highest expression of who you want to be. And then as we dive into the next one, it's all about connection with our fellow human beings, and then connection to the natural world and connection to spirit. So it's an ongoing journey. And from this, we get to create this beautiful kind of blueprint of who you are and the life you want to be living, and what really adds the deep fulfillment and profound meaning to our lives. So thank you again for being with us. And an email will come out with this video. There are beautiful gifts from all the speakers that you can find in the Facebook group, either in the Vision Builders Academy group community, or for those in the 3Cs community, which is all about connection, collaboration, and celebration. All right, beautiful souls, that's it from me today. So much love, and bye for now.